They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hey, Tim.
Hi, Ryan.
And hello, everyone. Hello, our friends and listeners, to episode 14 of Dismembering Horror.
Yeah.
And what is this podcast all about, Tim?
Oh, you know, it's just like two pals palling around, watching some scary moves, and just, talking about.
Well, as far as we see
about
it,
that fun scary moves vibes.
we dismember horror. We say what worked for us, what didn't work for us, and anything noteworthy. And we are two filmmakers, so we're coming at it from that angle.
Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah, we'll get it down. This is episode 14.
Yeah.
Get it done. The teens.
Yeah.
Mid-teens. And this is our last episode of our
Ever.
Japanese horror.
Oh,
stream
yeah.
of Japanese horror.
Yeah.
And we went way back to not traditional, an older one.
Yeah. 1964 or
Yeah.
5. I kept seeing it listed in.
I got
as
64
both.
down.
I don't know. Yeah.
How did you like watching an older film? Because I think we left off last episode where I'm like, we got too many in the 2000s here.
It's cool. I think sometimes you forget what was kind of going on, like the aesthetic and like the film techniques and just sort of it's a totally different vibe to get into a movie from the 60s.
Yeah.
Regardless of what genre it is. It's just like you're suddenly transported into a totally different time and you feel it in all the ways.
Right.
So it's really cool. And I kind of had forgotten that that's what we're like about to get into. And the second it turns on, you go, oh, right, this is going to be that thing. That's a different thing.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think about why I was so excited to watch an older film, or generally am, I guess, with horror too. And it's because, like, I realized thinking about it, it's as something gets older, it's less, it's not a word, recreatable,
It's less recreatable. As something gets older, it's less recreatable.
Like, while everything, even if it's new, is always going to be unique to the time, and you can't recreate a 2012 movie.
Yes,
like,
I know what you mean.
It takes
you can try, and you can rehash, and you can kind of like be derivative or whatever, but you can never really capture that thing that existed in that.
Its aura
time
becomes stronger. So it's like, even if we watched a horror movie that we watched 5 years ago that was made 5 years ago, I could probably watch it more actively now just because the actors are different. Something about it, like, it crystallizes more for me.
That's cool.
So, and because new movies from the 1960s are never going to be made, I think that's the extra excitement there for me.
Nice.
That makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from.
And like how what you said about Asylum, I remember, was like, this movie is a snapshot of a certain kind of film.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, I felt with Onibaba a couple things like...
Oh, wait, what is the film we're watching?
I already said it.
Just right now. All right, folks, with that lead in, yes, today we are talking about Onibaba.
Yeah. Okay, so I think before we even get into what worked and what didn't work or whatever, I think we need to address the big what I would feel like is a big question for this movie. And as I looked stuff up, it's debated online as well between critics and whatnot. But I'm not sure that I would say this is a horror film.
I was going through that too. Like, I think, I mean, I was going to bring this up later, but like, I think I was confusing it for Kwaidan of just vaguely being aware of Japanese films, which I looked up afterwards is more of like an actual ghost film.
Oh, cool.
And this one, but it was we found it somehow through Horror
Oh,
List.
no, it's most certainly listed under horror all over the place.
I am going to... If I'm going to take...
I think we can dive into that as we go along. But I think just on the surface, did you feel like it was a horror film?
Yes, that's what I landed on.
Cool. Great.
And
I have reasons that I could justify, but I would say I would side more with it not.
This is what I landed on. Is its intention to horrify. That, for me, constitutes a horror film.
Okay. Yeah.
And I certainly felt that way, like, way more than any slasher movie, like, or whatever, by the end.
Well, look, I'm not gonna plant my feet in my saying it's not horror right now.
Okay.
I'm
maybe
pretty,
can we check up?
Let's check in at the end and see if I've leaned one way or the other.
That's great. Well, having said that, can you give us a summary?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay. In feudal Japan, arbitrary feudal Japan countryside, two women, a mother and her daughter-in-law, are fending for themselves and staying alive by actually killing mostly soldiers who come through their territory and selling off their belongings to stay alive. And when the mother's son's compatriot,
or when their neighbor,
their neighbor comes back and they realize that, and he tells them that her son is dead, it sort of sets off this triangle of how are we going to survive, what's important, are we fucked, are we not fucked, do we want to fuck, do we not want to fuck,
right.
And through the inner workings of that, some pretty like insidious or malevolent behavior or thoughts start to arise, and I think that's sort of it.
I guess for me, the bigger, while that's like the jumping off point, the instigating thing when he gets back, what really, the story really takes off for me once the younger woman starts seeing him.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. That's sort of
that's the crux of the conflict, at least. Yeah. Which was interesting to watch play out. Cool.
Yeah.
How would you rate it?
I think it is firmly worth renting. In fact, I would say that, sort of again going back to whether it's horror or not, I think it, as somebody who likes movies at all, like especially if you are just a general fan of film, you should watch this movie. And so I would say rent it for sure. Like spend those dollar bills.
Yeah. I think after we watched it, I was leaning towards rent it, but now the way it's stuck with me, I'm leaning more towards like they released it on Blu-ray Criterion. It'd be one I'd be pretty happy to have on my shelf.
I saw it.
I thought it was just DVD.
Nope, I saw the
really.
I saw it listed as a Blu-ray.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
We had to watch it on DVD because we could only find
If you're having trouble finding it, so did we. But we did track down a DVD of it, and we hope you can too. Because hey, I'm saying buy it, so that means you should at least watch it.
That's pretty high praise.
Well, I think it's.
I'm not saying it's undeserving. I think it's good.
Well, should we get into why and move into what worked for us?
Yeah, we should.
What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked for you?
Great. Yeah, I totally get why it's a 5-star Criterion movie.
It is so pleasing to look at.
Oh my god. Should we start?
I think before, I don't even want to get into story stuff. I just want to just on top of that, before we get into it, just talk about the composition and film,
Yes.
like the beauty of how this movie is made.
This is literally,
And it will transition us, I think, into story stuff for sure.
I'm not kidding. I'm using the word literally, because I know people throw that word around, but I think it's one of the best shot films I've ever seen, or even recently, or I could say my personal favorite. Like I want to inject this in my DP's veins, this film. Like it's so
Absolutely.
It's so gorgeous.
Well, and
it's stunning.
It's doing things to its benefit right off the bat. I mean, just the setting creates some really beautiful. Because it is black and white, obviously, and a lot of it is shot in a deep focus, and so you're kind of seeing everything in frame. But by putting them inside this tall grass, you get this just contrast. Everything is contrast, right? You've got the light side of the blade of grass and the dark side of the blade of grass in every single one of those shots, and you get the depth of that, even though it's enclosed, right? You get this oppressive feeling and this sort of, for me at least, grass is my heaven,
right?
So you get this you get, even within the literal the literal, what am I, the grass, the actual literal grass
space, yeah,
you are also getting binary contrast, right? You're getting, and metaphorically, you're getting that, right?
How it made an open space a closed space.
Right. I mean, that is such brilliant. And it made me think, is this landscape something that's very common in Japan? Or did they choose a very specifically uncommon thing to have this movie take place within? And I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen that stuff in other movies, that landscape in other movies, so I assume it's pretty common.
From the get-go, it just made me, we kind of are in the habit of going, we're sitting down to an older movie, it's not going to be shot as interestingly, and even just in terms of...
I'm shaking my head violently.
Right. and even just in terms of what the camera can do in its literal movement.
Yeah.
They had crane shots, dollies, it's just so interesting. The camera was so active.
Yeah, there's some really beautiful, just little dolly, short dolly slides inside of the hut that they're very what's it called when your camera movement is
What?
Not active camera. What's the term I'm thinking of?
I don't know. Observing or
no,
not active. Well, can I give an example of one of my favorite uses? Because I've wrote down a few, and coming off of what you were saying, the moving camera, the tracking shot. So after the older woman sees the younger woman together with Hachi for the first time, and she runs out and sort of has a little breakdown, she goes and hugs a tree.
Oh yeah.
And so the camera first, it tracks into her hugging the tree from afar, center framed, mind you, which was really, that's something to do. That's a bold choice, doing center framing. So it tracks into her hugging the tree, and then crane tracks up to the top of the tree, once we've reached her. That was a beautiful shot that stood out. So yeah, there was a few examples of center framing, which is a bold choice. And then the opposite of that, rather than following the rule of thirds kind of thing, they would do extreme side left and right frames.
Yeah, there was really cool stuff.
Yeah, that was all over. But I remember one that was sort of towards the end when the woman and the younger woman are having a face off. And one of them's in the way top left corner, and one of them's in the way bottom right corner of the frame. Yeah,
dude. I mean,
so neat.
And it's so it creates such an unsettling and you know, I complain a lot about things that take you out of the movie. I think when you have composition that's that extreme, I think I would initially go, ooh, you probably shouldn't do that because it's going to take somebody out of it. That is apparently not the case. It just enhances your sort of underlying feeling about what's happening in that moment. I mean, assuming it's executed well, but it's
serving the storytelling
right.
so well.
It's just so cool to me.
There was just a few other shots that stood out to me. Well, there was the ongoing, you know, blades of grass, but we had the slow-mo blades of grass, or if they were whatever it was. But it was a specific speed of slow-mo too. You know, it's when you think, okay, slow-mo is more than just the effect of slow-mo when you're using it. It's how slow you're choosing plays a big part in the effect that it's having.
Yeah, and also sort of how you play around within the filming of it, if you are changing your frame rate when you film it, or if you're doing the slowing down in post, right? So you can mess around with that on the day. And there are, I think, many examples of post slow-mo just looking bad, right? And it stands out, and it bothers me.
You mean that jittery effect slow-mo?
Yep.
I'd hardly call slow-mo. Yeah, that's
I mean, it's a stylized.
Well, do you know what I'm
thing.
talking about? Do you remember the speed of this slow-mo? Like, what kind
I
of?
don't know how you would describe it.
Well, just did it have a certain effect on you too that was unique?
I think it just it was hypnotic, I guess, more than anything. Like, it didn't stand out to me in any way, but I just felt like I was being sort of put into a trance by the first 30 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
And then there was a moment where I wish I remember exactly what was happening. I believe it was I think it's when somebody is running. I mean, they do. There's a lot of running around in the
There is actually
the grass
there's
in
a
this
lot
movie,
of running in the grass in this movie,
which I love.
It's more than half. Yeah.
Should we let's get into what worked, right?
Oh wait, did we even not announce? No, yeah, no.
Did we do that
transitioned.
already?
Yeah.
Okay.
You threw me off.
God, I don't know where I am. I'm just.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I have one last that I specifically remembered of as far as the shots, I mean, in it that were examples of how well it was shot.
Yeah.
Just the very last one that I have down was when they see the samurai fighting and they know they're going to get him. You know, they know they're going to kill him for their clothes or whatever. The ones that go in the little, not river, but the little creek or whatever. You see them seeing him with close-ups of their eyes, and it cuts to those close-ups of their eyes really quickly.
Yeah.
But it's not just typical close-ups. Like, there's something kind of like interestingly framed with one of them with both of their eyes, and then the other one, it's like more framed just around one of their eyes. So it was just a neat choice. And just showing like, okay, it's not this typical like evenly framed eyes and then eyes, two eyes, one eye, both interestingly shot.
Well, I think this is what you should be doing when you're making a film.
Yeah.
You should be saying, okay, just for this example, you don't go, well, we need 2 close-ups, and so a close-up is framed this way, right? You don't do that. Know that there is sort of a common usage of a close-up and framing and like where the camera sits, you know, for that particular shot. Know that, but it's more than that. Know where the camera goes in the close-up for this particular moment and this particular character's face in that moment. And make an adjustment if there is one to be made around that. You know, it's like one of the dudes needed that close-up to be, you know, kind of canted and, you know, both of his eyes.
Her eyes, yeah.
Or her eyes, yeah. And the other one needed it, like, it says something about who that character is.
Yeah, it's triggering they're about to kill, like they're seeing their target. It did a better effect that way, yeah.
And so I know that you know, and partially this is why I like making movies, is because there is endless minutia, and you can go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole about that. But making decisions based on things that enhance the storytelling visually is fucking fun and exciting. And when you see a movie that clearly is directed by somebody who knows way more than you,
Yeah.
it's so fucking exciting. So, yeah, I mean, I really like this movie.
You said let's talk about how well it was shot first. Actually, I wanted to say something before we talk at the way ahead of things that worked for us that I think would have been helpful.
Okay, great.
Which could have been helpful for this, but it was just interesting because it's something that worked for me, but is outside of the film itself. It's just in the credits of the film, but we aren't using their names because they're actually credited as woman and younger woman. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that for the sake of our podcast here, that's how we'll be referring to them as. But
because the dude has a name,
right? It's
Hachi,
and then the person they sell stuff to was like another Yoshi or something else like that. Yeah. But anyways, that really worked for me because it highlighted the central conflict of it, of just this sort of the jealousy of the older woman and the younger woman, and having their who they're being referred to as like a stage play refer to that. Yeah,
and you know, this could very easily be a play.
Yeah,
no question. So it's.
Well, I think that's why I wrote, that's the top thing I have for why I think it was like a 5-star movie, is it's a prime example of how when done well, less truly is more.
Sure, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you don't need to go crazy.
It's like 3 people stage play, essentially. Single location, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah,
and what that allows you is just the conflict to just be so strong and just
right. You're trapped inside this world with them,
mm-hmm.
And like anytime you have a triangle of people, that's usually what you're going to be going for, right? Like, you know, it's always 2 against 1 at any given point.
Yeah, and it was neat how it played out because like I didn't want her hooking up with this sleazy guy, you know, like
you mean the young girl?
Yeah, but then as soon as
I was like, I get it.
No, but then once they started to, I was like, oh yeah, no, totally, like yeah. Like so I saw at first
the world's at war and you're in desperate times.
Right. Well, what I think it was
get to fucking,
and this was the question, right? Totally. Yeah, and that's why I was with her. She became the more central protagonist. Sure. I was sympathizing with. You know, as the older woman went more demony.
Right.
But I was wondering, did you see it as when the neighbor came back from war, do you think that he had any hand in the son's death? And that he could have been lying in order to sort of make that happen, in order to take his wife?
Yeah, I mean, yes, sure. I don't think it matters. I don't think there needs to be an answer.
No, I know. And that's why I think it was an interesting just question to have placed in our heads, though.
Yeah.
That's why I bring it up.
Yeah. I think it's because of how this story is set up, I think, you know, it's purposeful to make that a question mark. And I think that you're making it a question mark through the mother's eyes. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, you get to go through kind of what she's going through and being like, and get that suspicion and maybe paranoia or whatever it is, to think, is this guy okay or not? Like, and right. I think just setting it up as that and leaving it unanswered, not even really, like, there's only one moment when I think she mentions like, well, maybe, like, what if he killed my son and what if he's not trustworthy? And then they kind of leave it be. Like
she doesn't clearly leave it be.
Well, I mean, she doesn't.
The older woman, yeah.
I don't think she's going after him with that in mind.
She generally distrusts him.
Yes, that's true. She distrusts him, but I don't think she goes so far as to say I'm you know, pissed off at this guy because I firmly believe that he killed my son.
That was something.
It's just it's a possibility in the ether of that world, for her. And I think that is, not every question needs to be answered in a good movie. If it's really well character sort of driven and you know where the character is coming from and sort of like what's going on in their minds, or at least to some degree, as much as you can, that often I think is more important than answering the question.
Totally. That's why it worked for me.
It's so good.
See, that worked for me so well that I was just curious just to talk about it, as far as
if I had to make sort of just a judgment like based on the movie, do I think he killed the son? No.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think so. Yeah.
I think he just is a dude who came home and was like, yo, and he even says this at one point. He kind of is like, yeah, look, it's just me and that hot young girl. Like that, we're the only ones around. And the mom is sort of like, well, like you could have me. Like, why don't you take me? And he's like, hey, girl, you're old. Why would I do that?
God, you just made me want to go to two different things I had.
Oh shit!
Oh no! Well, I'll go to the first one. I was gonna say was
no. Don't go to the second one.
The second one?
No, I don't.
First one. Well, you brought up the dynamic of the three people, and on top of that, it's very rarely seen. Or I mean, it sort of takes an almost, I guess, a feudal kind of setting or an apocalyptic setting almost, where you have the kind of a survival situation. That's what I'm getting at. When you see a survival situation, so you have the relationship be between a few people where they dislike each other or distrust each other, yet are relying on each other.
Right.
So it was super
That's
interesting, that first scene where he comes back and is like scarfing their food, and it's just like a given. We give our neighbor food, yet they aren't all jiving. Right.
Yeah, there's like baseline kindness, and then there's everything else.
Right, with outside of a survival situation, that animosity would be big enough where they'd just be like, F off, Yeah,
totally. But also, I think there's an important reality to this dynamic that the mom, I think the mom understands much, much more critically than the daughter-in-law. And that's that they're doing okay. The two women have been surviving, but barely together. And having this guy around helps them. Right?
If he's actually catching fish and stuff. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And so I think that her understanding that like there is a level of desperation to their situation. And so it's almost like, I think part of her motivation to not want the daughter to hook up with him is to not rock the boat, keep things kind of status quo.
Right. I mean, she says that. That's absolutely a big part of it, where she says, like, I'm afraid of her leaving. What will I do? I can't fend for. She knows she can't survive all on her own, or has to be.
Which I think is interesting, because pretty soon after that scene, she does go kill on her own.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like, oh, but you can. That's cool.
You mentioned him rebuking her when she made the advance. I thought that was really cool as far as showing something about her character, the woman's character, in that, like, we'd normally think maybe we'd see like a strong reaction as far as something more visceral, but her just sort of being her acting tough, and was like, come on, da 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 da, and then as soon as she is rejected, just kind of like carries on. Okay, whatever. I think that is a strong reaction, or it's not a strong reaction. It shows a lot about her character, as far as like she's actively denying softer emotions. She's that kind of person. She isn't going to show her tender side. She's let down. She
never really does.
That's why that tree shot that I brought up earlier was such a big deal, because that's the only time we see her visceral reaction.
Yeah.
And how that she's keeping a lot in. And she's keeping it in by having this sort of very, like, this is how the world is. This is the rules of the world.
Yeah, and this is my role as an older woman, right? Or a mother or whatever. It's sort of, we have these. I think the characters are very much like painted with kind of a single brush, right? On the surface of like, man, mom, young girl.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a surface thing, and that's fine, but the interactions and the circumstances show us that they are more than that. And in a way they are fighting against the single brush stroke of who they are, which is a really cool, I think, kind of setup to sort of have your characters.
What do you mean? How is each one? You mean
well,
each one is fighting
the
against
girl? The girl is the girl,
right?
and the girl is not supposed to go have sex with a man, and she's supposed to be subservient to, the matriarch. And, there are all these rules that define the girl.
And the man is kind of a bumbling, fool.
Yeah. That's right. So the man, none of these three characters want to be what their title, what their sort of
right. And the matriarch should
says
be
what they should be.
The matriarch character would be like the loving, forgiving one when she's
right.
jealous.
They're all like, fuck, no, I'm not this. I want to go do this other thing.
Yeah.
Which is cool because it's sort of that's
how people are. No
that's
one is
life. I think about this all the time. I'm like, how come? I don't know. How come? When I used to do acting stuff, I'd get pegged for certain things, and I'm like, dude, I am not that person. But whatever. That's just what people. That's what their initial first glance sort of typecast whatever thing are going on. But we experience that just as humans all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so to sort of take those two things and slam them into each other and depict it in a way that we can, I don't think you watch this movie and have an intellectual thought that this is what's going on. You just go, yeah, that's what it's like to be a fucking human.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so sort of, ironically, because this is an older movie, but it's so refreshing to see characters that subvert their own, basic character or their basic character definition, and go, nah, I don't want that.
That's almost just a good lesson as far as you should. What if you have a character and you can define them by caricature or archetype,
right? And
that's your starting point. Then you make the whole movie about how you show that they aren't that,
right?
Well, kind of just to sort of keep touching on if we are going to keep floating onto the horror movie or not, I think where part of that sort of hesitation to call it that can come in is because calling it a fable or folk tale feels more accurate.
Yeah,
but I don't think that is accurate when talking in terms of genre, because in film we don't really have that as there's no folktale fable section. Yeah. Maybe on Netflix there is, but
no, that's
the
true.
video store, because it's a morality play. This is what you get. This is what you get for saying I'm going to hell for seeing this guy. That's the younger woman talking to the older woman.
Right.
When it ends with her, ends with this as a sort of morality play of the ending of the mask.
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She puts on the mask to scare her.
Yeah. It's so good.
Exactly. What else?
I have a couple. I had just kind of little tiny things. Set design is really good. Little moments. There are a lot of little kind of peekaboo moments because of this setting where people are looking around a corner or popping up out of the grass or whatever, and it's just charming as fuck. I just every time it happened, I kind of was like, oh, I love this.
Mm-hmm. Well.
And I guess the pit and the presence of the pit.
Yes, that's what I was just gonna.
So important.
How I was just gonna transition from saying any question it's a horror movie is saying from the get go though this was a horror film for me because of the pit. What was that opening quote?
So the opening quote is the hole, deep and dark. Its darkness has lasted since ancient times.
So good.
Right?
It's just
and that's just what it just is. It's
it's
a title at the beginning.
It's so, pun intended, deep.
Yeah.
It's heavy stuff, and that's what I was saying as far as, when done well, less truly is more. Like, it's a whole. And just coupled with that quote, and that I'm getting into, clearly something that worked for me, the whole at the beginning, the setup, the sound of the wind, and then seeing the whole just sort of clearly from those different angles, just as a whole, I'm like, okay, this is why this is a horror film. Like,
yes, exactly. And the fact that this whole lives in an environment that, given the direction of the wind, you do not know it's there, right? Like, so nature is sort of a part of this world and almost dictating the danger or lack of danger, your ability to sense danger. And that's a really cool, eerie setup to get into right off the top, where you just are like, oh shit, like, somebody's going in that thing. And that, knowing that that's an eventuality, primes you instantly. And I think that I will lean a little bit more, like, that is a perfect tenet of a good horror film. So...
And so, how the whole, what did you think of the ending? Her jumping over it, screaming, "I am not a demon," right? Or no, she's like screaming, "I am a human. I'm a human being." That's what she's screaming.
Human being, yeah.
And she jumps over the hole, presumably, probably falls in.
It's not answered, right?
Yeah.
This movie is,
which is why it's a good ending, or one of the reasons why it's a good ending.
Sort of like we were saying a second ago about not answering whether or not he killed her son. The movie is a lot of sort of posing a question and then not answering it, because the answer is not important. It's what the question causes the people to think and do.
That's like
that's so good. What I don't feel like we see that a lot.
Well, I think that's a tenet of a good movie is when you have and this is, I'm sure I've said this before in our show, but it's like when someone says, "What's your theme?" You should not be able to tell them.
Yeah.
You should be able to tell them themes it explores.
Sure.
You should be able to tell them then questions it asks, it poses, but does not answer.
Yeah.
Because that's what it communicates on that level of gut-wrenching contradiction. It's part of the human experience and reality of,
It's so true. I mean... I will wrap myself around a tree, not in the way that she does, but I just mean figuratively. If I start to get fixated on why a certain thing is happening, like in life or whatever, or in the story, and I'll spend all this time trying to figure out what the answer is, and a lot of time you have to step back and be like, It does not matter what the answer is. The sort of the exploration of the question is all that matters. Right.
And so let's explore that ending a bit, because I loved it. I was thinking that ending, it had me shook in the best of ways as an ending should. And I was trying to think why? And then I mean, kind of my jumping off point to that is if you sort of, I forget who said it, but the idea of there's two kinds of horror, the kind of horror that's the external threat, and then the kind of horror that horror is inside, that you have those, well, in this case, the demons.
Like you're capable of.
Yeah. The evil on the, right. Evil on the inside or external evil.
Sure.
And this was a case where it was almost a mix of both, but as far as that ending, her saying, I am human, I'm not a demon, that's that horror of, demons aren't necessarily external.
Absolutely.
Like I mean, it's that horror of screaming for help and not getting any, you know?
Again, I'm so, maybe I'm pulling this out of the movie, but I don't think so. I think this director is incredibly fucking good and smart and knew exactly what he was doing. It's, again, kind of a binary. It's her saying, her behaving like a demon for the last hour and a half of the movie, and then having that that reality that is in her actions something that is inside of her, right? And then having the mask pulled off pulls that demon, or that sort of the metaphor of that demon, like her actions, out to her outside.
Right. Because
having that inside outside thing, that contrast of, it's sort of like it's high contrast, right? Well, inside outside, dark light, right. I think that is thematically used throughout this movie with like the most amazing precision.
It's that horror of when she finally puts, or not finally, but when she puts on the mask, and we're thinking, where's I thought that was like, it seemed supernatural. I thought, oh, maybe this actually, because when it happens, you're questioning, oh, is this a ghost coming back? Is this a real demon or whatever? But then when you realize it kind of shakes you as far as, oh, that doesn't mean it's not a real demon. Like her putting on the mask and acting out in this way, there's the demon.
Yeah. It's so good. Did you then, when the masked, there's a term for this. What's the translation? Onibaba is
if we're talking about tracking supernatural things, can we save that for things of note?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so when this is the Onibaba, let's just call that. Yeah. Call it what it is. So when the Onibaba first appears after the guy wearing the mask has died. So when she, the young girl is running, she's running through the rain. I think, the first time it's not raining. I think there's like 3, right? Yeah. So she's running, she doesn't know it's coming, and it like rises out of the shadows and blocks her way. Did you in that moment not immediately think it's the old mother?
This is exactly what I said. I saved for things of note, but we'll talk about it.
Oh, I thought you were referring to something else. Okay, so
yeah, no, I was questioning it. I thought that this could be. I thought the way it moved, I thought was clearly supernatural.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was getting to some larger point here. What the hell was it?
I don't know. You're excited about it. Well, maybe we'll... I mean, we could go on, but I feel like this pretty much covers it for me for, things that worked for me.
What I was going to say is the moment that happens, for me, the rest of the movie is a horror film. Like right on board horror. So whatever that means, you know what I mean? It just is, because you have this sort of haunting specter thing. Like it moves into a sort of a different plane. And then when you find out that it's the mom, if you didn't already know, and they have the fight itself inside their hut or whatever their home, that is really fucking like intense and scary in a way that I really like. And then the fucking getting off of the mask that's like body horror, like something that I personally just fucking love. It's so like it's like hitting all.
You mean how her face was messed up and like
just the whole act of trying to get the mask off,
like how she had to hammer it off.
Dude, that was so like thrilling to me.
Like how it was hurting her to have it take it off clearly.
And yet she's like screaming like get it off at the same time. It's so fucking good.
And to see her how she's ecstatic about it finally being off, yet we're seeing how it's now physically,
it's like you took off the mask to reveal her real mask.
Yeah, her scars or warts or whatever was left behind.
Yeah.
Burn marks, I don't know.
It's good.
Super quick, this is about it, but just, hey, I really loved the music in it, both how minimal it was.
So minimal and so pleasing. I was like, why didn't Juwan do this?
Right. He said, to translate, why didn't Juwan do this?
Yeah.
Which I was just watching again some clips of it. Oh my god. No, that's a total side note. Anyway, if you find Juwan, Tim, we thought it was bad, Juwan, how much music there was into it. Oh, no. If you look at the Hindi dub, it's literally wall-to-wall music.
Wait.
Anyway, back to Onibaba.
I have so many questions. But back to Onibaba.
It was more just like I didn't want to forget about it. Showing you later.
That is hilarious.
So the music in this film, though, Onibaba, like from the sort of like jazz at like what do you call that kind of like not acid jazz
60s. Just fucking
starting
60s,
off. But then
man.
there was
So
one
good.
where like during it where the violins were just.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a score to have something underneath.
Yeah, it was used when it had to be used. It was very effective. Great. Okay, should we move on to the next section? Can we?
I have one other thing.
Okay.
So many nipples.
Right. So this was a. I'm glad, Tim, that I had that under things of note. I'm glad you just went ahead things that worked for me.
That truly.
If I'm being honest,
for me.
If I'm being honest, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it made it real.
Yeah.
Like how casual they were.
It also leads me into our next section.
Okay. Well, do you want to say why that worked for you? Because I just said it made it real, aside from just being full nipples on display and how wonderful, nudity
on a
is.
10-year-old level, I love boobs.
Okay.
On a film level, it just is like, dude, this is the world that they are in.
Yes.
And that's important to know and to be like, yeah, man, you're wearing it. Like one dude's wearing a loincloth. That's it. That's all he's got going on. And the women are wearing their very light and beautiful looking, comfortable little robes.
Right.
Which I want so bad.
Well, I second.
But yeah, it's to me it's world building. It's sort of like, dude, chill the fuck out. This is where we are.
I second all that you said.
I love it.
All right, things that didn't work for us.
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
Okay, so on the boob note, the second the mom, her boobs came out, I was like, this woman is like 25. Like I was like, she's maybe 30. Like the actress is like
yeah, probably like mid-30s.
And I was like, and it so it was hard at first for me to sort of, and I think I said something halfway through the movie. It just, I was like, they've put some makeup on her, but once.
Did you look up how old she was when filming?
Oh, I didn't. I should.
Well, I mean,
I initially had a hard time getting behind this because they say it like 20 times early on, like you're old lady, get away from me, oh ugly old lady, and I'm like,
she
first
has
of all,
big
she's
streak of gray hair.
Yeah, I'm like, first of all, she's not ugly, and second of all, she's not old at all, man. Like she doesn't seem old.
Well,
to
I
me.
mean, what I said to you when you said that during it was, I'm like, yeah, but we're talking about feudal Japan here.
Yeah,
like you're either
and I get behind that. The difference between
you're either old or you're young,
right? Yes. So that's fine. I just initially, it was one of those things that kind of, I was like,
right.
Am I going to buy this? Like, and like, they keep saying she's really old and she is not.
Right. I mean, in
so
comparison, but
no, well, her performance actually, brought me right back around to it. She's really, really good in this.
Oh yeah.
So, whoops. Back in things that
worked for us. The acting. Well, that should have been a given.
Yeah.
Things that did not work. You know what, Tim? I really didn't. You said you were coming up, struggling to come.
That was my one.
I didn't have anything. The only thing that I put down has nothing to do with a film. It's sort of what I already brought up, which was just the circumstances and my expectations going into it. Where I think I was confusing it with Qui-Gon, which I'm like, which we haven't seen either, but is more of a, I think, an actual ghost story, or it's a compendium. It's an anthology of ghost stories. Okay. Anyway. So I thought, and I think you heard this in our last podcast where I'm like, oh, up to something ghosty with what we haven't seen Onibaba. No, so I just sort of had, but okay, demons maybe. A little bit. But so I just was sort of watching it, kind of waiting for stuff to happen that wasn't happening. Anyway, it was one of those examples where like having knowing nothing about it both help and hurt my viewing experience.
Yeah, kind of for me,
Or
too,
I guess what I
actually.
thought I knew about
Right,
it is what
right.
was hurting it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I got over it, and I think that's why I was saying too, like, why renting it, why it probably upgraded from rent to buy for me was just that initial viewing
okay.
experience was like, okay, it's one of those, okay, now that I know what it is, I can soak it in even more.
Yeah, you make a good point. Now I'm sort of feeling like if you are a filmmaker or want to be a filmmaker, you should buy this movie.
I mean, when I went to the first video store that thought they had it but didn't have it, he was like, "Oh yeah, we have Onibaba." Like, yeah.
He's like, "Of course we do.
Yeah.
We're the video store, you know." What do you think?
no.
What? We don't have it?
He was very nice, and I thank him very, very much.
That's great.
But yeah, in a cartoon version, yes, maybe that's what I heard. Okay.
No, you know what? I do have one other thing.
What?
I have one other thing. This really did not work for me. And I feel bad kind of saying it because, you know, I don't want to offend anybody, but why they got to be beating them clothes so hard?
Like they're
mad at those clothes.
They were kneading them.
Dude, they were taking big pounding sticks and just pounding them clothes.
Those wet clothes.
Yeah. Take it easy on your clothes.
That's the only way to dry them, right? Or
I don't
clean
know.
them.
I have no idea.
You beat the dirt out of them.
I guess so. Man, they were really
we need to look up feudal Japanese
what for?
washing techniques.
I bet it's effective, but man, I felt bad for them clothes.
Beat their clothes. If you've seen it, which I hope you have because you're listening to this, you know what we're talking about. Okay, let's do things of note.
Okay, cool.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Okay, well, since we already brought it up, just sort of, and since I had said, like, watching it, I kind of thought might have been a more overtly supernatural film.
Mm-hmm.
So just thought it was interesting and noteworthy to track what possibly could have been supernatural at any given point, which is what I was doing. So, like, first we have the demon showing up, which is we clearly see as someone in a mask, but that could still be supernatural because we don't know what his face is, or we don't know if it could be somehow the ghost of the sun.
It could. Well, yeah. Actually, that was my initial thought.
Yeah.
I was like, it's her son. It's her son.
It could have been anything.
But I think if I were to sort of what's dramaturgically pick this apart, I guess. I think that guy is a representation. He's a metaphor for all of the soldiers that they've killed that are in the pit. You know, the bones at the bottom of the pit.
Oh, cool. I didn't think of it that way.
Sort of is the like metaphorical vibe I got.
I don't know
him.
though, because what he represented more, I think, had something to do with him saying, you know, he was the most handsome man in Kyoto, and how the woman had never seen something truly beautiful before. And then the sort of irony of that he can't take off the mask without ruining his face.
That's interesting. I have a whole pathway of thoughts around that. That's one aspect to it. But go on.
Well, that's all I sort of registered as possibly supernatural too, of kind of like a mask you can't get off, the sort of
the curse of it.
Yeah, being a curse, and then also the most handsome man in Kyoto, something about that seemed maybe more fable-esque, as we already said. Yeah. But at the same time, just, you know, slightly not like supernatural, but extra natural. You know, and then next, which this was the thing that I already mentioned and said we'd save it for, but the older woman who we learn is the older woman, like when she first appears in the demon mask, I'm like, how she was literally like floating over to the girl, which now knowing it is just, I'm sure it's just sort of how the younger woman was perceiving it, or almost like how it is from her perspective.
In the grass, I think there's sort of, I felt like there was leeway to be like, you know, she's just moving in a weird way.
I settled on it was for effect. I mean, they definitely had her on wheels or something, or a rope, you know, whatever.
God.
But that was like...
The lighting in those scenes.
There's some cool lightning effects, yeah.
There's moment, like, how precise they are with getting somebody in full shadow, moving into light, and then through the light back into shadow is really
So that was something that worked for you?
beautiful for me. Yes. Okay, so I kind of going off of what you're saying, I took it in a more like, I guess, undertone or thematic way, in that I think this movie. So this is a big question I have.
Wait, her flying over?
No,
or-
no. The mask, the masked soldier.
Yeah.
So this movie was made in 64, 65, whatever. It came out in 65. And I'd like to. I wish I knew more about the director, just sort of his like history or whatever.
I have a few little tidbits about him I'll save.
Okay, I think that
Kanito Shindo.
Maybe I'm gleaning this, but this movie I think is a Seven Deadly Sins movie.
I'm just looking at you like, explain.
Okay. You can probably say that for any movie, right? In a way. You could be like, oh, I could find the Seven Deadly Sins in this movie. Like, people are depicting them.
The young
But I
woman
feel
being
like-
accused of lust.
I feel like this one, it's a little more right on.
Go down the list.
That makes me think that maybe it is. Lust, the girl. Wrath, them killing people. Pride, the guy with his mask. Gluttony, there are two scenes where somebody like chows down. It's Hachi when he first comes back, and then later when he has he's gone to the guy who you trade for stuff.
Right. What else?
He brings back birds, and the young girl eats two of them. She like grabs the other one and she chows down it. So gluttony. Sloth, there's a whole scene with Hachi like laying around and napping in the middle of the day and being like, meh, meh. And he really doesn't do anything almost at all. Like he just sort of waits to get laid. Greed. I think the trader guy is sort of the closest I can come to that one.
Collecting his treasures.
Yeah,
Hoarding his treasures.
Yeah. Envy is quite obvious to me. The mom envies just this whole situation of not being the young girl
Or
anymore.
jealousy, yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm pulling that like that's just. But it.
I think that like I could say
like in other words, I don't know that I could say that the filmmaker had that intention. That they literally said we're gonna go through the sins. I'd almost say that probably is not the case. But I think they were at least aware.
I mean,
maybe. Or maybe that's just who we are, right?
I think that's I don't think it was intentional, because I think it's an example of like what I was saying, how when you have a conflict that can be so clear, you're pulling out a lot from a single thing, and you're seeing all the ways it manifests, and I think that this was just because it was done well, because we saw the conflict in all these places, that it was going to show up in a lot of forms. So I
guess I think what makes me go down that road too is sort of the idea of the demon and the pit, and it to me it's very evocative of a lot of those the sort of stories around the sins, like Dante's Inferno and like all the whatever. So maybe that's something I
well, it's a neat
into or whatever.
I think it regards as a neat way to track. If it's all about like kind of reprimanding someone for being sinful, and how that in itself is a sin, and that's the ultimate sin of this film, as far as it being a fable. Maybe it was helpful to see it manifest in all these forms, and that are sort of the seven official ones. I don't know.
According to some guy.
Onibaba, translated literally, means demon hag.
Yep.
Just wanted to mention that.
Saw that.
And it was, actually like an old fable story originally. It's what it was based on. I have here from our Wikipedia that it was inspired by a Buddhist parable called Bride Scarring Mask, translated something, or mask with flesh attached, in which a mother used a mask to scare her daughter from going to the temple. She was punished by the mask sticking to her face, and when she begged to be allowed to remove it, she was able to take it off, but it took the flesh of her face with it.
Jesus.
So pretty straight up. I mean, not straight, but clearly
Yeah.
took ones.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I don't. Did you mention the director's name? Is
Yeah, Kanito Shindo.
okay, cool. Yeah, he's so good.
And the tidbit that I had about him, they had quite a bit of trivia for him.
He was 100.
Yes, that was the last one I had. When he continued working as a scriptwriter, director, and author until his death at the age of 100.
Dude,
Right?
guy's amazing.
He directed 48 films and wrote scripts for 238.
Jesus.
Many of his films feature strong female characters.
I dig it.
Yeah.
I like this guy a lot. I admire him.
So, I mean, those are all the things I had down for things of note. Do you have anything else?
No.
Because if not, we should
no.
circle back to
Yeah, I'm good.
do you feel this should be on a horror shelf at the video store?
Yeah. No, it should. I think the middle of the movie does not play as a horror film for me. But the bookends of it, well, not even the bookends, the opening and basically the last act
Right.
do. So that's it. Yes, it is. In a lot of ways, like European horror structure, or even just film structure, they have a very long first act. This didn't have that, but like it's just a different sort of way to structurally pull it apart.
Right.
So fine, but I think it is a horror. I mean, I think when you get to that ending, yeah,
Totally.
it just is.
Right.
It's just not scary like I had sort of because of the other J-horror movies we watched, I think I was like, wait, but this is way different. And so it took me a minute to come around, and even right before we started talking, but now that we've kind of talked it out.
But I mean, as far as any of the ones that we watched, as far as getting me on a gut horrific level the most, this takes the cake.
Yeah, I mean, I still really don't like body hair, so X-Day might have it for me. Do you have any recommend? Oh, I have a cobweb continuity. Shit. It's so dumb. She throws a rock at his door and the door falls off, and then he opens the door like in another take.
It didn't fall off. It fell through.
Oh, okay. It looked like it fell off.
Hey, now.
I just want to, like,
Kanito
get your
Shindo
ire.
was on it. Yeah, you're just looking to raise my ire.
Yeah.
Okay, we're done with Onibaba recommendations.
Sure.
I was watching, some horror me movies in October.
You were just chomping up on that
me.
horror.
Yes.
And
I watched. Did you see Kevin Smith's Walrus Man movie, Tusk?
No, I saw the first horror or whatever sort of
Okay.
of his. He's doing a trilogy
Yeah.
of.
So no, Tusk is the first one of the True North trilogy.
Yeah, the True North trilogy. Oh, so the one
Red State.
Red State is
That's
not
different. That was.
I thought that one was in there.
No.
Okay. So Tusk was the first one.
Right. So my recommendation is the second one, Yoga Hosers.
Oh yeah,
starring
with his daughter.
His
right?
daughter and
Yeah.
Johnny Depp's daughter.
That's right. Yeah.
I was.
It's a horror film.
Yeah, I
Full
mean,
on.
it's. I don't know what else you'd call it, and that's kind of what I loved about it.
Cool.
And so, why I recommended it is because I know you're a horror fan listening to this, and because us horror fans, why I love horror, people have their different reasons, is because it's if everyone else looks left, I want to look right, and this is one of those films where like. I was, kind of borderline recommending it to a friend of ours, and we were talking about like Tusk as a jumping off point because they're very similar just as far as kind of tonal vein, and he said I kind of read about it and it was like I don't need to see this. And then referring to both Yoga Hosers and Tusk, I'm like, you're right. No one needs to see these films. But that's precisely why they tickled me so much.
That's funny.
Like, it really is just, I just think it's so beautiful when you have something that's so just like from the deepest specific like place of some, like, dude, Kevin Smith is a weird guy,
no doubt.
Like, yeah, I mean, like, you know, like the best of us and the rest of us, right?
So I think what's great about him is that he's just like, dude, this is who I am. I'm gonna do my thing, and he you know, has gained enough success to do that,
right? And these movies are super low budget, but there's such passion on display in them, and like he loves his you know, those kids so much. And it was just so stupid. It was so good seeing something so stupid.
That's awesome.
You know, refreshingly dumb, and just that you could tell his love was in it so much. So I thoroughly enjoyed it because of all that. Yoga Hosers.
Nice. Well, my recommendation is I was re-listening to our Strangers Pray at Night episode, and I got a little guilty. I felt a little guilt over how harsh I was about the writing, and looked up the writer, who's this guy Brian Bertino, along with another. There's 2 writers on Strangers Pray at Night, and I kind of trashed them both. But so Brian Bertino has done some really good stuff, and I mean, one of the movies that I like, horror movie that I've of the last few years that I've liked close to the top of maybe 5 or 6 horror films I've seen, is a movie that Brian Bertino wrote and directed. So,
What is it?
It's called The Monster. It's 2016. And it just, it's great. And so
I haven't seen
in my shitting on Brian, which I think was, look, I'm not taking it back. Strangers Pray at Night is not well written, but you know, he has made a good movie. So go watch a good movie by him.
The Monster,
2016. It's really good.
Great. I'll check it out. So next week, well, it's actually something we saw in theaters, and now we're going to be releasing the episode of.
Yeehaw!
We hope you saw it too. Because
You must have. You must have.
We pick out these ones that are even hard to track down, like Onibaba and X Day. We both had to rent on DVD, but we hope you see both of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, we went in to see Halloween 2018.
Woohoo!
And well, we dismembered it.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
It was fun, man.
Yeah, it was cool seeing, well, I guess we'll get into it then.
Yep.
So until then, you can find us at dismemberinghorror.com.
Yep, dismembering horror at Gmail, and at Instagram, and I guess Twitter is at dishorrorpod.
Whenever we do an Instagram post of a release, I link it to the Twitter. That's the most we've done.
I need to work a little bit on that.
You'd be good at Twitter if you liked it.
I do. I just don't get into it.
Yeah.
I just read shit. I don't interact. So I'll get into it. If you guys start interacting with us, I will interact back. So
yeah.
Rest assured.
Great. So we hope you've seen Halloween, and we'll see you next time.
Yeehaw! Let's do it! Halloween!